Hi guys, welcome to China Perspective. My name is 𝗵𝗵𝗶H and you may know me as a German recruiter in Asia. So we have just left the Western New Year period and we are about to enter the Chinese New Year period. So right now is traditionally the hottest time in recruiting. Right now is the time when many individuals are looking for a new job. If that is you, I would like to share today some tips and tricks on how to optimize your job search, especially in the China context. Stay until the end if you want to know my personal opinion on whether you as a Westerner should or should not learn Chinese. Guys, first of all, let's get started, and I would like to speak briefly about the difference between active job search and passive job search. Now, if you're actively looking for a job, I really recommend you do both. If you're happy in your job and you feel you have a high level of job security, meaning you're not going to be let go and your labor contract is going to be extended, then passive job search would be fine. What are the differences? Active job search, as the name says, requires more activity. For example, in an active job search, you would go very targeted to events, you would go to industry events, and you would engage in networking with other professionals in your industry and potentially interesting companies. Active job search also means that you're going to send your CV to companies where you could imagine you would like to work. From caveat I have, it is really good to be aware where the decision maker for that job role is based. If you're looking to apply for a lower or a mid-level role, the decision maker for this job is likely going to be in China, so it pays off to send your CV to the HR team or to the manager of that China entity. If you're applying for a senior role, let's say a general manager or managing director, this hiring decision is most likely not going to be made in China, but in the headquarters. So in such a case, it is recommended that you send your CV either to the global HR leader in the headquarters or maybe to whoever is running the headquarters. Information who that is usually easy to be found either on Google, on the company homepage, or on LinkedIn. I would also recommend that you use China job boards. So you have job boards like 51job, 𝗬𝗵𝗶, 𝗵𝗵𝗀𝗲, and so on and so on. Subscribe there, even though if you are a Westerner, you're going to see, to be honest, a lot less roles which would be suitable to you. What is a really good resource is the WeChat group 𝗪𝗵𝗶 career. That is a WeChat group, maybe you already know it. I really recommend to join, where a lot of individuals are sharing job opportunities available for foreigners that they hear about in the chat, and then it's up to you to reply. I would also really recommend that you subscribe to chamber newsletters. So I'm referring to chambers of commerce, and here it really depends what languages do you speak. If you speak German, then it is good to subscribe to the German and Austrian, maybe the Swiss chamber. If you speak Spanish, then by all means use all the South American, the Spanish and other chambers. So it really, I would encourage you to structure it by the languages that you do speak. If you had French when you were younger and you speak French, please add the French Chamber of Commerce. The job opportunities for foreigners that you see on the job boards of the chambers are usually connected to being a native speaker or speaking fluently the language of that chamber. All right, so that was the active job search. Now let's talk about the passive job search. So in the passive job search, you're basically sending your CV to recruiters. And here I would like to make one very important difference, which I think many people are not aware of. There's a difference between the CV you send to a headhunter, such as myself, and the CV you send to an HR manager inside a company to which you want to apply. What is the difference? The difference is the length and the keywords. So usually when you send your CV to a recruiter inside company X, then you already know what job you're applying to. Maybe you've seen it online, maybe somebody sent you a job description, maybe you heard about it in your network, but you usually probably will know the title, you know what the company is doing, and you probably know the location. In this case, it is recommended to keep your CV short and sweet, and whatever past working experiences you had, which are relevant to this position. Let's say, for example, you're applying to be an operations director for a small medium manufacturing company of 200 people out in Suzhou. So you know title, you know what they're doing, and you know Suzhou. So everything in your CV that is related to your operations experience should be highlighted and elaborated on. Everything that is related, or if you have experience working in cities such as Suzhou or in other cities in Jiangsu, this should be highlighted. Everything that is related to having worked in manufacturing companies or in small, medium, family-owned companies should be highlighted. Everything else, please don't delete it, but you don't need to have the same depth of information in all your job stations. So a really good best practice is to have one template where all of your jobs, all of your work experience is fleshed out in detail, and then you copy paste and you customize it specifically for that role you're applying to. I would additionally recommend you that you use bold or other kind of visual aids to read through the text. That just makes it easier for the person reading it, keeping in mind it would not be uncommon for a recruiter to look at easily 50, sometimes even 100 CVs, and after a while you go a little bit blind, to be honest. So everything things that you can do to just visually highlight it will definitely work in your favor. A CV that you send to a headhunter, such as our company, for example, is different. So in the case where you send your CV to a headhunter, very often you don't know yet what job you're applying. And also you're just often sending the CV so that I have it in my database and I can find you when we have a good job opportunity coming up, right? And what's really important to know is that recruiters, we work with keyword searches. That means, how does it work? You're sending me your CV and I will include it into our database. And first of all, because I know a lot of people get really nervous about what font size should I use, how big should my picture be, what format should I have, I personally don't care. Other headhunters may disagree. I personally don't care. Why don't I care? Because I copy-paste it into our format. And then once we have an opportunity, I'm talking to you on the phone or I'm meeting you face-to-face for the interview, I'm taking my notes, and then your CV and my notes I'm writing into our template. So your original format is not going to make it to the end product which I'm sending to my client. I know this is a big topic for many, but just please be assured, if you're sending your CV to a recruiter, make it look clean, but don't overthink it. Regarding the keyword search, so once I have received your CV and I put it into our database, and let's say 1 week later, a month later, a year later, I'm getting a job opportunity. What do I type in? For example, the operations director role. So I would type in operations director. I would type in the different manufacturing steps that are needed. Maybe I'm typing in some tools, qualification, maybe some customers, client application, product categories. So I'm using keywords. And then what does the system do? The system looks at all of my keywords and then brings me out those CVs on top, which meet as many keywords as possible. That means there'll be a keyword ranking. What does it mean for you? That means for you, a CV that you send to a headhunter ideally has as many keywords as you can. So of course, not going absurdly, but as many keywords as you can. That means adding all the products that you worked with, being clear about for example, the different steps in a manufacturing process, being clear about which industry you're in, which industry are you serving, which industry are your customers from, which industries can you branch out to, who are your clients, of course, if it's not confidential, in which region have you been, what IT systems you have used, what certifications you have, what kind of audits you did, to really just put it in with a comma and so that you can be found in this keyword search. This is a CV you should send to a headhunter. A few additional tips for your CV. First of all, please, and this is a very common mistake, interestingly, please put your contact information. I am looking at a fair amount of CVs where there's no email and no cell phone, and then I'm like, oh well. And usually if you're a foreigner, I find you on LinkedIn, but this is something that actually happens very commonly, so please make sure to put your email and your telephone number. Also very important is, even though you know your company and your industry, most people probably don't. So what I really recommend to you, if you put the company name and your title or the position names that you're working in, add 1 sentence, maybe 2, not more, shouldn't be too much, about what this company is doing. For example, I could say General Manager at DirectHR. And then I know what it means. I hope you know what it means, but most people probably don't know what it means. So I could just add a little sentence that says, DirectHR is one of the largest German-speaking recruiting companies focusing on China and Asia. And then this is enough. If you want to, you can add some of your product categories. You can add that the headquarters is in whatever country. And you can add, for example, has how many employees globally, and so on. Please also add your location of work. That means if you're working in Shanghai, in Suzhou, in Beijing, or wherever you work, please add it as well. Another tip that I have is be specific in terms of your achievements. So what is really recommended is that you have a section where you put company name, your title or your position, very brief explanation what this company is doing, maybe company homepage, and then your tasks. So what did you do? Please also don't copy paste your task for each different company. And I do understand if you've been in the same role in different companies, it may be very similar, but then maybe you can use, ChatGPT and just tell him to rewrite the same tasks, or just use your own best judgment to rewrite the same task. Just for me, if I see the same task in the same order 2 or 3 times, it just feels really lazy. And then it's not a great feeling for a recruiter to say, okay, so this person didn't really put a lot of effort into the CV. How will this person, is this person going to put a lot of effort into my client when I introduce him or her to my client? So just rephrase it a little bit. I think that's a good best practice. And what I also really recommend is to be specific. So below your tasks, you should have a field that says achievements. So things that you have reached, that you are proud of, that you have achieved. And here, please be specific and, well, realistic. What I see a lot are things like, I drastically increased the sales performance for our company. And so my question is, by how much, and did you do it alone? So it is always good to say, I led, or I managed, or I spearheaded a sales activity, whatever that was, which resulted in a 30% increase in revenue, for example. Or you could say, part of the team which led whatever initiative, which resulted in 20% cost cutting. So What did you do? Realistically, did you do it alone or did you do it with a team? Did you lead it or were you a team member? And then what are the results in percentages, in absolute numbers, maybe in a currency, resulted in X amount of US dollar savings, whatever it is. Please, as a reminder, do not put anything confidential in your CV. You should not put anything that you know is confidential in your CV. You should also not communicate anything that is confidential during an interview. If a company asks you to disclose something that is confidential, not a great company, so really not recommended. Another thing that you could add are the reason for leaving. And this is especially important if you've been staying a shorter amount of time. So, and we all know the years since the pandemic have been wild for many companies, so many companies have been struggling and continue to struggle. So it is not necessarily a bad reflection on the employee. He or she has left companies in brief succession. But for example, if your company did not make it through the pandemic, you can just write, left the China market or downsizing due to economic downturn. That is something very valid. We are all here, we've all been here, so we know what's been going on, and you can just be honest about it. In terms of reason for leaving, I recommend to make it personal. So what I see very often is career development and family reasons, but then be specific. What is the family reason? And again, you don't have to say anything you're not comfortable with, but you could say family reason, need to spend more time with my parents. Family reason due to illness. Family reason, whatever you have. The same as career development. So if you put career development as a reason for leaving, it would be really helpful if your next job actually shows a career development and not something on the same level or even below. Just like these little tips that hopefully make your CV more engaging. I often get the question if people should put their salary expectation on a CV. I believe that a CV that you're sending to a headhunter does not need to have your salary expectation. If we're having an interview, then we're having an interview very specifically about the job opportunity that I have at hand, and then I will have a budget for my client, and then we're going to talk about your salary. You do not need to volunteer this information on your CV that you're sending to a headhunter. One additional recommendation I have is to go wide. And what do I mean with go wide? I mean to send your CVs to as many headhunters as you can. And I know, especially if you're coming from a German point of view, this feels awkward. We often have this deep ingrained sense that we want to keep our data confidential. But to be very honest, first of all, in our interconnected world, there's not much that's confidential. You put it on any job board, it's not confidential anymore. I can see it on your LinkedIn. You sent your CV to me 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I probably still have it somewhere in my database. So just this whole idea, emotionally, I understand many things are not as confidential as we think they are. Keeping that in mind, as I said earlier, do not put anything that's really confidential in your CV, please. One thing that's also really good to know is that most recruiting is done geographically regional. That means if you're looking for a job, unless it's a top management job, the decision is going to be made in that country. And now let's get to a really important point, especially if you're a Westerner in China. If you've been in China for a while, you're very much aware that it's much, much harder to find a job opportunity for Westerners. And those job opportunities that still are on the market, as rare as they almost always ask for very good or fluent Chinese language skills. And I often get this question. I know it's a very hot topic. Should a Westerner learn Chinese, assuming you have not learned it until today, or you're not above, I would say, a survival taxi driver language level, which is not sufficient for the work context. So why is this so controversially discussed? I think it's quite clear. Chinese, first of all, it's a difficult language to learn. It's a language which has been classified as a category 5 language, which is the highest level and the most difficult language a language can be classified in. It takes a really long time to learn. So I sometimes have candidates who are coming to China or who are in China and they say, Miriam, I don't speak Chinese, but I learned other languages. I will just do it besides my job and on the weekend, and I'm sure that in 1 year I can be fluent. And I'm like, it's a difficult language to learn. I personally also learned it. I still remember the calluses on my hand when you write for hours and hours and hours and hours and try to have it go into muscle memory. So while undoubtedly there are some people who are gifted and can learn any language, including Chinese, very quickly, for the majority of Westerners, that unfortunately are just unrealistic. It takes a long time to learn. In 1 year, you're not going to get to a level unless you really dedicate many, many hours each day and you're not having a job on the side or many other hobbies. Unless that happens, you're not likely to learn it to a level which brings you to working knowledge level or above within 1 year. I'm sorry to say, but that's just the truth. So I think being a little bit realistic with what is possible and not possible can also be helpful. So then the question is, should you make this time investment? And here it really depends also where you are on your professional journey. Let's say you're already a senior professional. Let's say you are around 60 years and you want to work another 5 years or 10 years, of which some of them you want to spend in China, and then maybe you are transitioning into a working retirement. You want to be on a beautiful island somewhere. You want to go back to your home country, do some consulting work. Then I would say the time may not be worth it. The time that you invest compared to the time that you benefit of it may not be worth it. However, this is of course up to you and for how many more years you want to work. If you're a junior professional, maybe you're just out of university or you're somewhere in the early or middle area of your career and you have another 20, 30, 40 years of work in front of you, I would really encourage you to learn Chinese. So what are the benefits of learning Chinese? Not only will it be much easier for you to find a job nowadays, it is also definitely helpful to improve your internal communication. Even though some places in China, the average colleague that you may have, the Chinese colleague, may speak English better than in others, it is still not uncommon that you go into a meeting where you have some people being really quiet because they feel less confident in their English. And that is really a shame because you're not maximizing the inputs that you could get from your team. It will also definitely make your life much easier talking to your colleagues, to your clients, to your suppliers, to understand what's going on in Chinese society, to be able to read Chinese news, maybe to be able to speak to a government representative in your city or in your province, to really just, if you are in a commercial role, understand what are the trends, what's going on in the China market, to really understand the culture. It will help you build stronger relationships. It will help you understanding unspoken cultural norms, which are hard to learn and hard to explain to somebody, but once you speak the language, you know. And maybe you have that too. Maybe you're already speaking, well, your country of origin language, for me that's German and English, and then maybe Chinese. And what I noticed, and I know that's the same for many others too, in all three languages, I have different personalities. So let's say you compliment my English and you say, wow, Miriam, your English is really good. For example, in German, I would say something along the lines of, yes, of course, I studied really hard, I spent a year in America, and I use it for daily work. And if you compliment me and I would reply to you in English, I would say, well, thanks, you're so kind, your English is not so bad either. And if you say that to me in Chinese, I would say, oh no, it's actually not so good, you're too kind. You know, so we have different personalities because we're working in the different cultural context. And so this is why it's definitely a benefit if you want to stay in China longer to learn the language. Also, it will help you in terms of problem solving, especially everything that is people related. Additional benefits for learning Chinese is that it will increase your empathy. Studies have shown that it can help prevent Alzheimer's, keeping your brain more active, and also it will be good for your professional growth and career. One very important thing to remember is that today we have early 2025, and right now you may be looking for a job in China. But maybe at some point in the future you're leaving China. But even if you leave China, looking at how everything is developing, the chance that either your client or your supplier or your competitor is going to come from China is very, very high, no matter where you are in this world. So for you to speak Chinese is definitely going to be an advantage, no matter where you end up, no matter which industry or which country you end up. So I know it's hard, but if you do have the time, if you do have the resources, I would really encourage you to learn Chinese. Hope this helps. Like and follow for more.